Hello, it's Jessica back again with another Possum Stamps card making video. This one has a spooky Halloween theme to it, so after watching this, don't forget to check out the other videos in the Possum Stamps Halloween card making series playlist. Like and subscribe for more inspiration. So this card has a striped color background with black silhouetted images of pumpkins and a few other fun elements. I'm using two different shades of black cardstock. I don't think this is necessary, but since I had these, I thought I would try this out. This is also a mini slimline card, which is 6 inches by 3.5 inches. And of course, for my spooky pumpkins, I'll be using the Hey Pumpkin stamp set from Possum Stamps. I also have some distress oxide inks that I will use to create the striped colored background. I wanted to keep the pumpkins black, and I knew black ink wouldn't really show up, so I decided to get out the Ranger Black Sparkle embossing powder and heat emboss the group of pumpkins with that. This embossing powder has a fun sparkle effect and makes seeing the details of the pumpkins even easier. I also decided to add another pumpkin just because I like to group things in odd numbers. To trim up the pumpkins, I use a pair of scissors and fussy cut them out. I'm cutting right along that embossed line too. I'll do this to the group of pumpkins and that extra one that I heat embossed. And once that is done, I will set those aside and start working on the background. I was going to mask off rectangles and ink blend that way for the background, but I thought trimming down a mini slimline panel would be much easier. The measurements of this are pretty easy. I cut 5 rectangles measuring 3.5 inches by 1 1/8 inch. The longest part of this whole card making process was the ink blending. So this card could be made pretty easy as a mass production card too, if you wanted to send out a bunch of Halloween cards to some friends or family. To get started with the Distress Oxide ink blending, I'm using green first. So I started with Twisted Citron, then Peeled Paint, and Rustic Wilderness. Once I have the Distress Oxide down, I do blend over these with Black Soot, Distress ink to darken them up. Just go easy on that Black Soot ink if you don't want it to be too dark. I like to use the Distress ink for the Black Soot instead of the oxide because to me the Distress ink is a little bit more pigmented. So it does darken up colors a bit more. The orange is a mix of spice marmalade, wild honey, and mustard seed. I think for a lot of these I could have went with just a 2 ink blend instead of 3, but I was having so much fun using all of these Distress Oxide inks with this cute little pumpkin card. The blue colors are Tumbled Glass, Salty Ocean, and Prize Ribbon. Now for the red, it does consist of Crackling Campfire, Candied Apple, and Fired Brick. And again, with all of these, I darken up the darkest color edges with the Distress ink and Black Soot. Now I can place these ink blended rectangles down. I'm using my ATG gun and adding adhesive to the back. I decided to have a wider white space on the 2 sides, so I brought those rectangles in a bit. So there is a bit more wider space on the outside edges. I think it's easier to center these by adhering the outer ones first, then centering that middle one as best, and I did this as best as I could, and then I added in the next 2. My spacing was pretty spot on by doing it this way, so it made it a little bit easier than trying to go from left to right or vice versa. The 5 rectangles do overhang slightly at the bottom, so I trimmed those up with my paper cutter. Now I have some fun elements to add to this. These are made using some dies from my stash. I cut some grass a couple of times in the lighter of the 2 black cardstocks that I showed earlier. I also die cut a spider and a couple of bats to add to my spooky pumpkins. So this was almost a no color card until I decided to add some white colored pencil shading to the pumpkins. It doesn't look like much at first, but I lightly color in the center areas of each of those pumpkins and then erase a bit of that white pencil. I just use a regular eraser. I think it adds just enough of a highlight so that you can really see the detail in the pumpkins, and it shows off the embossing powder a little bit more. I do go back through with a Prismacolor blending pencil and blend out that pencil a little bit more, and you'll see that at the very end of the video. Now I can add those to my scene. After adding the spider, I move on to stamping the sentiment. I didn't get this quite lined up the way I wanted to. The problem was the spacing in between the ink blended rectangles in the background, but I think you can still read it pretty easily, though I wish the Y in the hey wasn't so far cut off. I should have moved it more to the left, I think. Now I can add the bats, and then I add some more sparkle with Stardust Stickles. The stickles matches the sparkles in the embossing powder on the pumpkins pretty well. Here's a bit of a close-up so you can see the sparkles as they shift in the light. I love how this turned out. I love these spooky pumpkins and the striped background, and I hope you give this a try. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.